When Maria stepped into that boardroom at midnight, mop in hand, she never expected the company's CEO to mockingly ask her to play the grand piano sitting in the corner. But what happened next would change everything. Before we continue, if you enjoy heartwarming stories of triumph against all odds, make sure to click that subscribe button. This is the best way for you to support our work. Thank you very much, and let's continue. Every night at 11 p.m. sharp, she'd arrive with her cart of supplies, her worn sneakers squeaking against the marble floors of the 42nd floor. The building's grandest conference room housed a beautiful Steinway grand piano, a remnant from when the space was used for client entertainment. Most nights, Maria would dust it carefully, running her cloth over its polished surface while humming softly to herself. Her family had sacrificed everything to pay for her lessons with Maestro Rodriguez, the most respected piano teacher in Bogota. But when her father lost his job and her mother fell ill, 12-year-old Maria had to stop playing to help support her family. She never touched a piano again. 23 years later, as a single mother in New York City, Maria worked 3 jobs to keep her daughter Sophia in school. During the day, she cleaned offices downtown. In the evenings, she worked at a diner near their apartment. And every night from 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. she cleaned Sterling & Associates, where the partners made more in an hour than she made in a month. But as the elevator doors opened on the 42nd floor, she heard voices coming from the conference room. Her heart sank. The executives sometimes worked late, which meant she'd have to wait to clean their offices. Through the glass doors, she could see 5 men in expensive suits sitting around the mahogany table. Empty whiskey glasses and scattered papers suggested they'd been there for hours. She recognized CEO Jonathan Sterling immediately. His portrait hung in the lobby, and she'd cleaned his corner office countless times. She decided to clean the adjacent offices first and come back later. "Hey you," he called out, his words slightly slurred. The conversation inside stopped. It was David Chen, the head of corporate law, known for his sharp tongue and expensive car collection. "David, what are you doing?" "I bet our cleaning lady here has never even seen an instrument like that up close." "Actually," Chen continued, emboldened by the whiskey and his audience, "I'll bet you $20 she doesn't even know what it is." He turned to Maria with a condescending smile. "Tell me, what's that thing over there?" Chen laughed. "But I bet she's never played one. Have you, sweetheart?" "Probably never even had music lessons. I mean, no offense, but people like her don't exactly have access to that kind of luxury, right? Why don't you go over there and play us something? I'm sure a simple tune shouldn't be too hard, even for someone with no training." She glanced at Sterling, who seemed torn between stopping his partner and avoiding conflict. "We could all use a good laugh right now." Maria looked at the piano, its black surface gleaming under the conference room lights. For a moment, she was 12 years old again, sitting at her family's old upright piano, playing through tears as her mother told her they couldn't afford lessons anymore. "Please, sir, I really can't." "You know what? I'll make it worth your while." He pulled out his wallet and placed a $100 bill on the table. "Play one song, anything, and this is yours. That's probably more than you make in a whole night of cleaning, right?" $100 would buy Sophia new school shoes or help pay for her daughter's science project materials. But the humiliation of the offer stung deeper than any words. "All you have to do is sit down and pretend to play something. We're not expecting Carnegie Hall." 23 years of silence, of invisible labor, of swallowing her pride to survive in a world that saw her as nothing more than a pair of cleaning hands. 23 years of walking past that piano every night, remembering the music that once lived in her fingers. She looked at Chen's smug face, then at the other executives who couldn't meet her eyes. Finally, her gaze settled on the piano. She lifted the fallboard, revealing the pristine keys beneath. Her fingers hovered over them for a moment, trembling slightly. Instead, she closed her eyes and let herself remember. She remembered the weight of the keys, the way the music seemed to flow from somewhere deep inside her soul, through her arms, into her fingertips, and out into the world. The effect was immediate and electric. The soft, melancholic melody flowed from the piano like liquid silver, each note perfectly placed, perfectly timed. Maria's fingers moved across the keys with a grace and precision that spoke of years of dedicated training, of a talent that had been buried but never forgotten. The other executives sat frozen, their exhaustion forgotten as they watched this woman they had dismissed, this person they had seen as invisible, transform before their eyes. She was 7 years old again, playing for her grandmother on Sunday afternoons. She was 10, performing at the church Christmas concert while her parents beamed from the front row. She was 12, playing through tears as her childhood ended, pouring all her love and loss into the keys. The nocturne built to its climactic passage, Maria's left hand providing a steady, rhythmic foundation, while her right hand danced through the intricate melodic line. Her technique was flawless, better than flawless. It was the kind of playing that could only come from someone who had lived with music in their blood, who had sacrificed everything for their art and found it again in a moment of desperate need. Not tears of shame or humiliation, but tears of homecoming. Every note was a memory, every phrase a piece of her soul she had thought was lost forever. He had heard this piece played by professionals at Lincoln Center, by renowned pianists at corporate galas, but never had it moved him like this. Never had it felt so raw, so honest, so utterly heartbreaking and beautiful. Even Chen, the architect of this cruel game, sat in stunned silence, his face flushed with what might have been shame. Then silence. Sterling was the first to speak, his voice barely above a whisper. "My God." "I'm sorry," she said, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "I should get back to work. My teacher said I had potential, but my family needed me to work instead." Sterling asked. When he turned back, his expression was resolute. "There's nothing wrong with honest work, sir," Maria said with quiet dignity. "And it's an apology from all of us for the disrespect you've endured, not just tonight, but probably every day you've worked here." "I can't take that, sir," she said. "If you really want to help me, sir, there's something else you could do. If you could help her with a scholarship, or even just write her a recommendation letter." "Consider it done," he said immediately. "But Maria, what about you? What about your music? Talent like yours doesn't disappear, it just waits." Sterling noticed her expression change. "Everything okay?" "Not out of pity, but because of what I witnessed tonight. We have a client, the New York Community Arts Foundation. They're looking for someone to run their evening music programs, teaching piano to kids from low-income families. The pay is 3 times what you make cleaning, and it comes with health insurance and benefits. You're leaving with our blessing and our gratitude for the years you've dedicated to keeping this place running." He paused. "Maria, when I was growing up, my parents cleaned office buildings too. I know what it's like to feel invisible, to have people look through you like you don't exist. But tonight, you showed us who you really are. Don't hide that light anymore. If you ever want to pursue your own music again, I could make some calls. My wife runs a nonprofit that provides instruments to kids who can't afford them. They're always looking for qualified teachers. After years of being invisible, of being ignored and dismissed, these people were offering her a chance at a completely different life. What happened here tonight? It changed all of us. You didn't just play a piece of music. You reminded us that everyone has a story, that everyone deserves respect, and that talent and dignity can't be measured by job titles or bank accounts." Sophia's name appeared on the screen. "I know the entry fee is a lot, but maybe we could ask Aunt Carmen to help, or I could pick up extra shifts at the grocery store. But sweetheart, I want you to know something. Tonight your mom played piano again. Happy tears, Mika, very happy tears." The merger documents that had seemed so urgent an hour ago suddenly felt less important. Not just for tonight, but for the fact that it took 23 years for anyone to ask about your story. "We see you here every night, but we never really saw you. That's going to change. You gave me something precious tonight. You gave me back my music." Music, she told her students, many of whom came from circumstances similar to her own, is not about perfect technique or expensive instruments. Music is about telling your story, about sharing the feelings that live too deep for words. This time she was surrounded by eager young faces, by children who saw in her proof that dreams deferred are not always dreams destroyed. She had won the state competition with a piece she had composed herself, a haunting melody she called My Mother's Song. But even more precious was the other letter she carried, one from Maria's old teacher in Colombia, Maestro Rodriguez, now in his 80s, who had written to say he always knew his most gifted student would find her way back to the music. Maria had kept Sterling's business card, not because she needed anything from him, but because it reminded her of the night everything changed. Sometimes she would hold it and remember how it felt to sit at that piano, to let her fingers remember a language they had thought was forgotten. The Community Arts Foundation had thrived under her leadership. The evening programs were filled to capacity, with waiting lists months long. Word had spread through the community about the woman who could play Chopin like an angel, and who understood what it meant to sacrifice everything for the people you love. He had established the Maria Santos Music Scholarship, providing full funding for musically gifted students from low-income families to pursue their dreams. The first recipient had been Sophia herself, but she would not be the last. Sometimes late at night, when the foundation was quiet, Maria would sit at the piano and play. Not for an audience, not for recognition, but for the pure joy of letting music flow through her again. She would think about that night in the conference room, about how close she had come to walking away without ever touching those keys. That respect is not earned through titles or wealth, but through the courage to show the world who you really are. Because without that moment of humiliation, she might never have found the strength to reclaim her music. Without that challenge, she might have spent the rest of her life invisible, her gifts buried beneath the burden of survival. The piano in Sterling's conference room still sits in the corner, polished and waiting. Sterling had considered moving it after that night, but decided to leave it exactly where it was. Sometimes when he works late, he remembers the sound of Maria's playing filling that room, the way her music had cracked open something hard and cold in all their hearts. He had learned that the people we see every day, the ones who keep our world running while we barely notice them, carry stories and gifts and dreams that could astound us if we only took the time to look. Maria Santos had been invisible for years, pushing her cleaning cart through corridors of power and privilege, ignored by people who considered themselves her betters. But music had made her visible again. Music had given her back her voice, her dignity, her future. And in a world that too often judges people by their circumstances rather than their character, that was the most beautiful song of all. It was from Lincoln Center, inviting her to audition for their community outreach program. They had heard about her work with the foundation and wanted to offer her a chance to perform with professional musicians in a benefit concert. The thought of performing on one of the world's most prestigious stages terrified her. What if she froze up? What if 23 years of silence had damaged her abilities more than she realized? What if she embarrassed herself in front of hundreds of people? But Sophia's voice echoed in her mind. "Mom, you've already overcome the hardest part. You found your music again. Everything else is just details." Maria had never taken time off from the foundation before, but her assistant insisted she go. "Mrs. Santos," the young woman said, "you've given all of us the courage to chase our dreams. Now it's time to chase yours." She wore her best dress, the one she had bought for Sophia's school graduation, and carried the sheet music for 3 pieces she had been practicing obsessively. Young conservatory students hurried past with instrument cases, their confident strides a stark contrast to Maria's hesitant steps. She found the audition room and sat in the waiting area, watching other applicants warm up. Their fingers flew across keyboards with casual precision that made Maria's palms sweat. Chambers said as Maria settled onto the piano bench, "Tell us a little about yourself." It was just waiting. But as her hands found the keys, she heard her old teacher's voice. "Maria, never apologize for your gift. Play with your whole heart or don't play at all." 2. The haunting opening that builds from whispered intimacy to soaring passion. It was ambitious to the point of recklessness, a piece that demanded not just technique, but emotional maturity and years of professional experience. But Maria was no longer the frightened woman who had stood in that conference room 6 months ago. She had rediscovered her voice, her confidence, her right to take up space in the world. Her fingers found the complex passages with surprising ease, muscle memory awakening like flowers after rain. The judges sat transfixed as Maria navigated the concerto's treacherous emotional landscape. Her playing had a quality that conservatory training couldn't teach, the depth that comes from living, from suffering, from finding beauty in the midst of struggle. Every note carried the weight of her story, the little girl who had lost her music, the mother who had sacrificed everything, the woman who had found herself again. "Where have you been hiding?" "Maria, I've been running this program for 15 years, and I've never heard anything like what you played today. We don't just want you for the benefit concert. We want you to be our featured soloist." She would need a formal gown, professional photographs, and the confidence to perform in front of an audience that included some of New York's most influential cultural figures. When he heard about the Lincoln Center concert, he insisted on sponsoring her preparation. "Consider it an investment," he said when Maria protested. "In art, in human potential, in proving that talent doesn't care about your zip code. Maria worked with a professional coach to refine her technique, spent hours each day practicing with a piano Sterling had arranged to have delivered to her apartment, and attended rehearsals with the orchestra that left her both exhilarated and terrified. The orchestra musicians, initially curious about the unknown soloist who had seemingly appeared from nowhere, quickly became her champions. The conductor, Maestro Thompson, was particularly impressed by her musical instincts. "You play like someone who understands that music is conversation, not performance," he told her after a particularly moving rehearsal. "That's rarer than you might think." Sitting in the empty concert hall, surrounded by the orchestra, she suddenly felt the weight of what she was about to do. In 48 hours, she would walk onto one of the world's most famous stages and perform for an audience that included critics, donors, and musicians who had dedicated their entire lives to their craft. These people, they're expecting someone else, someone with credentials, with training, with... Maria walked to the piano on shaking legs, her hands trembling as she placed them on the keys. The opening notes of the concerto, which she had played perfectly dozens of times in practice, felt foreign and impossible. She stopped, took a breath, and started again. Another mistake. The orchestra waited patiently as Maria felt her confidence crumbling. The familiar feeling of inadequacy washed over her. The same feeling she had carried for 23 years. The voice that told her she didn't belong, that she was reaching too high, that people like her didn't get chances like this. Chambers appeared beside her. "The only difference is the story you tell yourself about what those feelings mean." Dr. Chambers smiled. "You're not afraid because you're not good enough, Maria. You're afraid because this matters to you. That's not weakness. That's proof that you're exactly where you're supposed to be. It was because your story embodies everything this benefit supports. The idea that music belongs to everyone, that talent exists in places we don't always think to look, that it's never too late to reclaim your dreams." She sat at the piano and looked out at the empty seats that would soon be filled with an audience. But instead of seeing judgment, she saw possibility. Instead of seeing people who might find her lacking, she saw people who might be inspired by her journey. She played the concerto again, and this time it soared. Every note was precise. Every phrase was shaped with the wisdom that comes from understanding both music and life. The orchestra followed her lead as she navigated the emotional peaks and valleys of Chopin's masterpiece, creating a musical conversation that left everyone in the hall moved and amazed. Maria arrived 3 hours early, too nervous to stay home, but too restless to sit still. In her dressing room, she stared at herself in the mirror, hardly recognizing the woman looking back. Gone was the tired janitor in worn clothes and scuffed shoes. In her place stood a woman in an elegant black gown, her hair styled professionally, her eyes bright with purpose. Instead, Sterling walked in, followed by the entire executive team from his law firm. Even Chen was there, looking genuinely happy to see her. "Mrs. Santos," said David, one of her younger students, "my mom says I should tell you that you taught me it's okay to dream big. She says that's the most important lesson anyone can learn." "Mommy," she said, using the childhood nickname she rarely used anymore, "I want you to know something. Even if you had never played piano again, even if you had stayed invisible forever, you would still be my hero, because you sacrificed your dreams so I could have mine. But tonight, you're showing me that it's possible to have both, to be a good mother and to honor the gifts God gave you. For understanding why I had to work so much, for never making me feel guilty about the piano lessons I couldn't give you, for becoming the amazing young woman you are despite all my mistakes." She would face an audience of strangers and acquaintances, critics and supporters, people who would judge her not just on this one performance, but on the unlikely story that had brought her to this moment. When she opened it, her breath caught. It was from Maestro Rodriguez in Colombia. "You were always my most gifted student, not because your fingers were faster or your technique more precise, but because you played with your soul. Tonight, remember what I taught you. The piano is not an instrument, it is a voice. Let your voice be heard. With all my love and pride, Maestro Rodriguez." On the music stand was a program from tonight's concert, which someone had apparently sent to him. "Music is not about perfection, Maria," he had told her. "It is about truth. Always tell the truth when you play." The woman in the mirror looked confident, poised, ready. But more importantly, she looked like herself, not trying to be someone else, not apologizing for her presence, but claiming her rightful place in the world. She walked through the backstage corridors, her heels clicking against the polished floor. Through the wings, she could see the orchestra tuning up, the concert hall filling with an elegantly dressed audience. The murmur of conversation created a gentle buzz of anticipation. Chambers appeared at her side. "How are you feeling? You've shown that talent doesn't have an expiration date, that dreams deferred are not dreams destroyed. You've given hope to every person who thought it was too late to reclaim their gifts." Maestro Thompson took his place at the podium, raising his baton as the orchestra prepared for the concert's opening piece, a brief orchestral work that would set the mood before Maria's performance. She thought about all the paths that had led her to this moment. The little girl in Colombia who had dreamed of stages like this, the teenager who had put those dreams aside, the young mother who had worked multiple jobs to survive, the woman who had found herself again through an act of unexpected cruelty that had become a gift. "Ladies and gentlemen," her voice carried clearly through the concert hall, "tonight's featured soloist embodies the very mission of our Community Arts Foundation. Maria Santos is a woman who discovered her extraordinary musical gifts as a child in Colombia, but circumstances forced her to set aside her dreams for more than 2 decades. 6 months ago, through a chance encounter, she rediscovered her passion and her talent. Tonight she makes her professional debut performing Chopin's Piano Concerto No. 1. Her story reminds us that it's never too late to reclaim our dreams, and that talent can flourish in the most unexpected places. Please welcome Maria Santos." Scattered throughout the hall were students from the foundation, their young faces full of excitement and hope. The concerto began with the orchestra alone, the opening theme establishing the romantic, passionate character of the piece. Maria listened, feeling the music wash over her, letting it carry away the last of her nervousness. This was Chopin, the composer who had first shown her that piano music could express emotions too deep for words. This was her language, her home. The piano's voice joined the orchestral conversation, weaving in and out of the musical fabric with the ease of someone returning to a beloved familiar place. Her technique was flawless, but more than that, her interpretation was deeply personal, filled with the emotional wisdom that comes from living a full and complicated life. The tender opening theme spoke of childhood dreams and innocent hopes. The dramatic development section captured the struggles and setbacks of adulthood, the times when life demanded more than seemed possible to give. But always, underneath the complexity and challenge, ran the golden thread of the melody, the essential self that survives all trials. Her fingers flew across the keys with seemingly impossible precision, navigating the treacherous technical passages while never losing sight of the emotional core. She was no longer performing for an audience. She was telling her story, sharing her truth, speaking in the language that had been her first love. Even the most sophisticated concertgoers, accustomed to world-class performances, found themselves moved by the raw honesty of Maria's playing. This wasn't just technical mastery. This was music as spiritual experience, as testimony, as proof that the human spirit can triumph over any obstacle. The second movement began with a gentle, lyrical theme that seemed to float above the orchestral accompaniment. Maria played it with the tenderness of a lullaby, and many in the audience thought of their own children, their own sacrifices, their own dreams deferred for the sake of love. Sophia wiped tears from her eyes as she recognized the melody her mother had hummed while working those long nights. The music that had survived even when the piano was silent. The exciting virtuosic passages that Chopin had written to showcase the soloist's technical abilities became, in Maria's hands, a celebration of resilience and triumph. Every rapid scale was a victory over doubt, every soaring melody a declaration that dreams, once awakened, refused to be silenced again. Maria and the orchestra held the last note until it faded into profound silence. For a moment, no one moved. The audience seemed suspended in the afterglow of what they had just experienced. Then the applause erupted. Not the polite appreciation typical of such venues, but a thunderous outpouring of emotion and admiration. The entire audience rose to their feet as one, applauding not just the performance but the performer, not just the music but the story it told. People were crying openly, moved by the power of music to transform and transcend circumstances. This wasn't just personal triumph, it was proof that second chances exist, that it's never too late to become who you were meant to be. The orchestra musicians were applauding too, tapping their bows against their music stands in the classical expression of professional respect. Chambers eventually had to take the stage to quiet the audience so the concert could continue with its second half. "Maria," he said, "I need to tell you something. 6 months ago, I thought I was a successful man. I had money, prestige, respect in my profession. But tonight, listening to you play, I realized I had never actually accomplished anything meaningful. You've shown us what real success looks like. Not just overcoming obstacles, but transforming them into something beautiful." A young woman told Maria that her performance had inspired her to take up painting again, after years of believing she wasn't talented enough. An elderly man said that watching her play had made him decide to finally write the novel he had been thinking about for decades. A teacher said she planned to change how she saw her struggling students, to look for the hidden gifts that might be waiting for the right moment to emerge. Chen, the lawyer who had mocked her 6 months earlier, waited until the end of the evening to approach. "It led to you finding your voice again. I don't deserve forgiveness, but I want you to know that you've changed me. You've made me a better person." "David," she said, "that night was painful. But you're right. It led to something beautiful. Maybe that's how grace works. Maybe our worst moments can become the foundation for our best ones. I mean, after tonight, everything changes, right? She could have a professional career if she wants it. The foundation needs me. My students need me. And I'm not sure I want the kind of life that comes with fame and touring. But maybe I don't have to choose between my music and my life. Maybe I can find a way to honor both." Videos of her playing went viral online, attracting millions of views and thousands of comments from people around the world who were inspired by her story. She received offers to perform with major orchestras, to record albums, to tour internationally. She decided to split her time between the Community Arts Foundation and a new initiative she created, the Second Chances Music Program. Working with Dr. Chambers and funded by Sterling's firm, the program sought out talented individuals who had been forced to abandon their musical dreams due to circumstances beyond their control. The program's first student was a former gang member named Marcus, who had shown incredible promise as a violinist before his neighborhood's violence derailed his education. The second was Elena, a refugee from Syria who had been a professional cellist before war destroyed her country and her career. The third was Robert, a retired factory worker who had played jazz piano in small clubs before marriage, and children made such dreams seem impractical. Each student brought their own story of dreams deferred, of talent buried beneath the weight of survival, and each one found, under Maria's guidance, that it was never too late to reclaim their musical voice. Maria also began accepting a select number of professional engagements, choosing performances that aligned with her values and her mission. She played benefit concerts for music education programs, performed at events supporting immigrant families, and gave recitals at community centers in underserved neighborhoods. These evenings, attended by her students and their families, featured Maria playing alongside her pupils, creating musical conversations that bridged generations and circumstances. It was at one of these concerts, exactly 1 year after her Lincoln Center debut, that Maria received the most unexpected gift of all. As she finished playing a Chopin waltz with one of her teenage students, she noticed an elderly man sitting in the back row, tears streaming down his weathered face. It was Maestro Rodriguez. Somehow, despite his age and limited resources, he had traveled from Colombia to New York to hear his most gifted student play once more. His hands, gnarled with arthritis, still moved gracefully as he played the opening notes of the first piece he had ever taught her. Every lesson, every correction, every moment you believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself. Outside, the city hummed with its restless energy, but inside, there was only music and memory and the deep satisfaction of a story that had found its way to the right ending. It was a small, worn notebook, his original lesson plans from when she was his student, filled with his careful notations about her progress, her challenges, her extraordinary gift. It was just waiting for the right moment to call you home. On the last page, written in his precise handwriting, were words she had never seen before. Maria Santos possesses a rare gift, not just technical ability, but the capacity to transform personal experience into musical truth. Whatever life brings her, she will find her way back to the piano. Music and Maria are inseparable. It is only a matter of time. Maria closed the notebook and walked to the piano Sterling had given her, the instrument that had transformed her small apartment into a home where music lived and breathed and grew. She sat down and began to play, not for an audience, not for a purpose, but simply for the joy of feeling music flow through her fingers once again. It started soft and tentative, like a question being asked, but gradually it grew stronger, more confident, building into a statement of purpose and hope. It was a song about second chances, about dreams that refuse to die, about the resilience of the human spirit. As she played, Maria thought about all the people her story had touched. The executives who had learned to see beyond job titles and bank accounts. The students who had discovered that talent has no expiration date. The audience members who had been inspired to reclaim their own abandoned dreams. The countless individuals around the world who had seen her videos and decided that maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late for them either. Sophia, who would grow up understanding that circumstances are temporary, but gifts are eternal. That setbacks are not endings, but redirections. That the most beautiful music often comes from the most unexpected places. The melody resolved into a gentle, peaceful chord that hung in the air like a prayer of gratitude. Maria sat in the silence that followed, her hands still on the keys, feeling the profound contentment that comes from being exactly where you belong. Outside her window, New York City continued its ceaseless dance of ambition and struggle, dreams and disappointments. But inside her small apartment, in the space between the piano keys and her beating heart, there was music. And music, as Maestro Rodriguez had taught her long ago, was all any soul really needed to feel complete. But tonight, there was just this: a woman, a piano, and the endless conversation between heart and hand that transforms silence into song.